Have you ever wondered how great illustrators can express so much with just lines? In this video, I'm going to show you how to hatch and cross-hatch your drawings step by step. We'll start by learning basic techniques to express form and texture, and end with a whimsical and stylized character illustration. Cross-hatching is kind of one of those things that everybody struggles with. It's a great way to shade without smudging, and a great way to shade and reinforce the form. Hatching is when you have lines going in one direction. So if you look at her hair and look at her fangs, right? This is hatching. So it's a sort of like series of lines going in one direction. Now, cross-hatching is when those lines intersect. So if you look at her hat, if you look at her fan, these elements are cross-hatched. So cross-hatching is a little bit trickier than hatching. You can mix the techniques as well. So let me show you an example of cross-hatching with pencil in like a shaded style, right? If you look closely at the hands, you can see that the shading is made up of a series of lines. The lines are going in different directions, but most of all, they are supposed to follow the form. Okay, so what that means is if I was drawing my hand here, skin cells can be a good way to study cross-hatching, because your skin cells actually have little lines that kind of go across. There's different ways to hatch. Like you could hatch completely sort of up and down like this, but this ends up looking a little bit flat. Personally, I like the hatched look where it's a little bit offset. So instead of it being completely square, like these are perfect squares, right? I like mine to be a little bit more of a diamond shape, so kind of like a parallelogram. So I like to not hatch at a 90-degree angle, but slightly elongated. What this does is it actually complements the form a little bit better. Let's draw a sphere. That's like one of the easiest things to start with when it comes to shading, right? We're gonna draw our ball and we're gonna try to cross-hatch that ball. Let's start by drawing a circle. And I'm just gonna draw 2 circles down here to demonstrate some other points. So you guys have all seen like the diagram of a globe, or like even the emoji of a globe. It kind of does this. Kind of these lines will wrap around the ball, right? So this makes the circle look 3D, and it's just because the lines are curved. If you used flat lines like this, you're shading a circle, not a sphere. So the way your lines curve will describe whether or not something is 3D versus 2D. Now, cross-hatching needs to go the other way. So a unified way to shade a sphere is kind of like this globe. And then here I'm shading a pancake or a hole. Let's say you're shading a really big ball and it's impossible to do a line that's like really, really long. What you can do is you can overlap your lines so that they start changing direction. So it's kind of like this. So they overlap a little bit. And then they start to make the illusion of something that's curved. So it's kind of like this, right? So you can make a curved effect with straight lines as well. Let's say the light source is coming from this direction. Then what you can start to do is shade in this ball. And I'm putting a slight curve on these lines, just a slight. And then you start to overlap it a little bit. Now there will be some overlap. And if you don't like the look of that, then you can kind of go over it and hide it with lines going the opposite way. But I'm going to shade a little bit of the top as well. Okay, so you basically will start to combine these lines and go in different directions. So here I'm putting in my core shadow. And the best way to hatch is to be aware of the forms and how they're turning, and squint once in a while, right? Just squint so that you don't forget to look at the big picture. So you can see this one is quite messy, but personally, I like that messy look. It makes it look a little bit more human. If you want to practice getting better at hatching, you can practice various lengths of lines. So when you hold your pencil, don't hold it too close, or when you hold your pen or stylus, hold it like a little bit farther away. So kind of like in the middle. Some people hold it even further away. And so you'll notice that like my wrist is not moving, like it's not doing this, right? Sometimes if you're doing small lines, you're moving your wrist, but if you're doing longer lines, you're moving your arm. And that distinction is really important. If I'm trying to draw a straight line with just my wrist, it gets a little bit wobbly, but if I try to draw straight lines, right? Try to draw a bunch of straight lines that are as parallel as you can make them. Okay, now go the other way. Go up and down. Once you find your sweet spot, right, then you kind of know, okay, it's easier for me to go from left to right than it is right to left, and it's easier for me to go up and down. Okay, so for me, it's going this way and going this way. Another tip is if you're using pencil to hatch, put a sheet of paper down so that you're not smudging your work when you're going back and forth. Okay, so we did a sphere. Now let's do a cylinder, because if you can hatch a cylinder, you can draw fingers. You can draw hands. You could pretty much draw anything. I love shading cylinders with cross-hatching because it really illustrates like the direction of the curve. Let's say you're hatching metal. I would just go in one direction. So I'm trying to create the illusion of something shiny. So with metal, usually there's like a darker part in the middle, like in the middle of one of the form shadows, which is the core shadow. And then if you're hatching the top, I usually like to go from dark to light, right? So here it's darker against light, and here it's darker against light. So it gives you the most amount of contrast. Then I think about my ambient occlusion or my cast shadow here. And so if you're shading shadows, you want to determine, okay, is the shadow going to be flat or is it going to be round, right? Is your cylinder on a flat surface? Is it on a round surface? And as cast shadows get a little farther away from you, they get a bit more, like a lot lighter. So hatching would be for things like metal. I would cross hatch things that have a bit more texture or things that I want to be a little bit darker. So for something like skin, right? So pretend this is an arm or just like a section of an arm. Then, you know, I would kind of go up and down first, right? There's a bit of a bend here. Just kind of have to be patient and just practice. Okay, so you can see the texture difference between hatching and cross-hatching. I'm going to draw Sir Cockroach in Tim Burton's style. Tim Burton has always been a source of inspiration for me. I love how he merges the weird and spooky with humor and style. And in this cross-hatching demo, I wanted to create a weird and humorous character, a fancy Victorian gentleman who just happens to be a cockroach. I love the contrast between something elegant and something most people find disgusting or unpleasant. And that kind of unexpected juxtaposition immediately creates personality and tells a story before the character even does anything. If you'd like my complete notes on hatching and cross-hatching to remember the techniques at a glance, you can download them for free. I'll link everything below. Whenever I start a drawing like this, I actually spend far more time thinking about the character than I do thinking about the rendering. I usually start by writing a list of their characteristics to help inspire the design. I love making lists because it uses a different part of my brain and helps me focus on the big picture. Cross-hatching can make a drawing look 3D and dramatic, but if the underlying design isn't interesting, no amount of beautiful line work can save it. I knew I wanted to frame this character in a classic oval shape to mirror one of my other OCs, a fancy spider character named Lady Arachnid, who was born in one of my drawing classes. Then I started by simplifying everything into basic shapes. A cockroach naturally has this shield-shaped shell, so I exaggerated that into a broader, more chiseled silhouette to make him feel masculine and dignified. From there, I laid on human characteristics, a top hat, Mustache, bow tie, a teacup, and a gentle expression. Those little design choices completely change how we perceive the character. Instead of looking creepy, he starts to feel polite, refined, and maybe even a little misunderstood. And instead of trying to invent everything from scratch, it's helpful to start by studying references of your subject and doing some style studies if you're experimenting with a new look. I looked at what I enjoy about Tim Burton's character designs, not to copy them exactly, but to identify the visual language that makes them feel so recognizable. Things like exaggerated proportions, symmetry, large expressive eyes, messy silhouettes, dark humor, and a slightly gothic atmosphere all became ingredients that I could reinterpret in my own way. One mistake I see artists make is treating crosshatching like a texture that gets sprinkled over the entire drawing. Instead, I think about what the surface is made of. Different materials deserve different kinds of marks. For example, I used only parallel hatching in the hair and mustache because hair naturally flows in one direction. The strokes follow that movement, almost like you're combing the strands with your pen. The antenna has a long cylindrical structure, so I use curve lines to reinforce the form of the tubes. I didn't know about this detail until I spent time examining cockroach anatomy and looking at detailed pictures up close. You may think I have some strange fascination with bugs, but I'm actually quite squeamish. I only like observing them behind glass or a screen. I first started drawing bugs in university to face my fear of insects from childhood, often giving them little stories to help me see these strange creatures as compassionate beings I'm coexisting with, instead of creepy crawlies that haunt my dreams. The top hat, on the other hand, is a much more solid object. That's where crosshatching works beautifully because the intersecting lines create a richer value and help communicate that the material is heavier and more structured. The cockroach shell is another interesting surface. It's relatively flat compared to the rounded face, so instead of wrapping my lines dramatically around the form, I kept many of the hatch marks flatter and more even. Earlier in this lesson, I compared this to shading a pancake instead of a sphere. The direction of your lines should reinforce the form underneath, not fight or confuse it. Texture is another place where hatching can do a lot of work. Rather than outlining every tiny detail, I let groups of short marks suggest the roughness of the exoskeleton. Our brains are very good at filling in missing information, so you don't have to draw every bump. Sometimes a carefully placed patch of texture says much more than rendering everything evenly. As I continue working, I'm constantly thinking about contrast. Contrast isn't just about making things darker, it's about deciding where you want people to look first. Around the face, I push my shadows much darker so the lighter features stand out. In other areas, I intentionally leave more white paper so the drawing has room to breathe. I'm using a set of Prismacolor fineliners, which has several thicknesses to support a variety of lines, anywhere from 0.8 millimeters to 0.05, which appears even thinner than a hair. Any type of fineliner works here, but I prefer the permanent ink to water-based because I can use it for line art and then paint watercolors directly on top without any ink bleeding. One principle of design to pay attention to is variety. If every part of the drawing uses the exact same density of crosshatching, everything starts feeling flat and repetitive. By mixing solid blacks, single direction hatching, crosshatching, curved lines, straight lines, thick lines, thin lines, tapered lines, and untouched paper, the drawing develops a rhythm and hierarchy and becomes much more interesting to look at. Although references play an important role in my creative process, I try not to become a slave to them. I studied real cockroach anatomy so I could understand how the shell, antenna, and textures actually work. And once I understood those ideas, I gave myself permission to exaggerate, simplify, and even ignore parts that didn't serve the character. References should inform your visual library, not limit your creativity. For me, that's really the goal of stylization. The better you understand reality, the more freedom you have to change it intentionally. You're no longer copying what you see, you're making intentional design decisions. And this is the human artistic sensibility that no technology can replace. I drew this character in a live stream, and our viewers helped name him. Shout out to Quinn, one of our YouTube members, and a previous student for naming him Sir Roachester. I think he'll make a lovely companion for Lady Arachnid. Maybe he'll cordially invite her over for some high tea. I kept the texture of the leg to simple hatching with tapered broken lines that give it a bit of a glossy texture. Combined with the spikes, which I had a lot of fun drawing, it didn't feel as overwhelming and also provided more contrast between the texture of the shell. At the end of the day, crosshatching is much more than a shading technique. Every line can communicate form, texture, weight, movement, atmosphere, and even personality. When those marks are supporting a strong character design, they stop feeling like decoration and start becoming part of the storytelling. And that's what I love most about traditional ink drawing, which is the backbone of every comic, manga, and graphic novel. Every line is a decision, and every decision helps bring the character to life a little more. Did you know you can start learning hand-drawn illustration techniques completely free by joining our weekly live streams? Simply subscribe to Wing Canvas and hit that notification bell so you'll know when we go live. And if you'd like to share your artwork for community feedback and connect with fellow art nerds around the world, join our Discord. Here are some other videos you can check out next.